My name is Olivia, I'm 30 years old, and my own parents demanded I cancel my wedding so my sister could marry my fiancé in my place. Before I tell you how I uncovered their web of lies and planned a revenge that would change our family forever, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Thank you for being here, and I hope you're having a good day. It means a lot to me. Go ahead and comment what city you're watching from. It was supposed to be the happiest night of my life. We were at the Oak Room at Blackwood Manor, a place I'd dreamed of since I was a little girl. The soft glow of crystal chandeliers bathed the room in a warm, golden light. 40 of our closest friends and family were gathered, their laughter and conversation a low, happy hum that filled the space. The air smelled of roses and expensive perfume. I looked across the long mahogany table at my fiancé, Liam. He caught my eye and smiled, that charming, easy smile that had made me fall in love with him. He was handsome in his tailored suit, the man who was supposed to be my husband in less than 48 hours. Everything was perfect. Deceptively perfect. My father, bless his heart, stood up to give the first toast. He tapped his glass with a fork, the light clinking sound silencing the room. He was beaming, his face filled with a pride that I had worked my entire life to earn. I've known since Olivia was a little girl, he began, his voice thick with emotion, that she was destined for great things. And seeing her here tonight, with a wonderful man like Liam. He raised his glass, his mouth open to speak, but before a single word could come out, a sharp gasp cut through the silence. Every head turned. My younger sister, Chloe, had one hand pressed dramatically to her stomach, the other covering her mouth. Her eyes, wide and glistening, were filled with perfectly timed tears. She looked radiant in the silk dress I'd bought her, the one she'd said made her feel almost like the bride. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice carrying perfectly across the silent room. "Dad, please, continue." I didn't mean to interrupt. My mother was at her side in an instant. "What is it, sweetheart? Are you okay?" Chloe shook her head, a single, perfect tear tracing a path down her cheek. I didn't want to say anything. I didn't want to steal Olivia's spotlight. But the doctor said I need to be careful, especially with the complications. A wave of concerned murmurs rippled through the room. Complications? My father stood frozen, his toast forgotten. Liam looked from Chloe to me, his expression unreadable. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. I knew my sister. I knew her talent for theatrics. But this felt different. This felt rehearsed. Then my mother turned to me. The concern on her face was gone, replaced by a look of grim, practical calculation. She walked over, taking my hand in hers. Her grip was tight, her nails digging into my skin. "Olivia, honey," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, loud enough for only me and Liam to hear. "We need to be practical. With Chloe's condition. Liam has a responsibility now." I stared at her, my mind refusing to process her words. "What are you talking about, Mom?" Her eyes darted towards Chloe, then back to me. "It's best you step aside," she said, her voice firm, leaving no room for argument. "Let Chloe and Liam have the wedding. It would be a shame to let all these beautiful arrangements go to waste." The world stopped. The champagne flute in my hand felt impossibly heavy. The happy chatter of the room faded into a dull roar in my ears, like the sound of the ocean trying to drown me. "Step aside. Let them have my wedding." The words echoed in the sudden, silent cavern of my mind. I looked from my mother's pleading, determined face, to Chloe's triumphant, tear-stained smirk, and then, to Liam. To my fiancé. The man who was holding my other hand, his grip suddenly feeling like a cage. I turned to him, my voice barely a whisper, a single question hanging in the air that would decide my entire future. "Chuk Chan Roy. Du de la kakvan kan lai kwakachuyan, duak viet live imo rung de dapan ukavi du di 25602, dung noi twan Thursday niam gat tatsie kakingwin tak kachuyan de dare." To understand how my world shattered so completely, you have to understand the world I had built. Not just the career or the wedding, but the entire fragile ecosystem of my family, a house of cards constructed on my secrets and their blissful ignorance. Growing up, there were always two daughters in our house, but it often felt like there was only one who truly mattered. My sister, Chloe, was 4 years younger, and from the moment she was born, she was the sun our family revolved around. She possessed a dazzling, effortless charm that I, with my serious face and stack of library books, could never hope to replicate. Our lives were a constant study in contrasts. I remember one afternoon in 4th grade with painful clarity. I brought home a report card with straight A's and a special commendation for a science project. My dad glanced at it during a commercial break, gave my head a quick, absent-minded pat, and said, "That's my responsible girl. Knew you could do it." The praise was a brief acknowledgement, a checkbox ticked. Later that day, Chloe came home in tears, clutching a report card with a glaring C in math. The television was immediately turned off. My mother enveloped her in a hug, stroking her hair as if she'd suffered a great injury. "Oh, my sweet girl," she cooed, "Mrs. Davison just doesn't understand your unique way of thinking. She's too rigid." My father nodded grimly, his jaw set. "I'll be having a word with the principal on Monday," he declared. "No teacher is going to stifle my daughter's spirit." I got a pat on the head for excellence, she got a family crusade for mediocrity. That was the unwritten rule, my achievements were expected, Chloe's feelings were paramount. So, I did the only thing I knew how to do, I achieved. I poured every ounce of my being into my schoolwork. It was my refuge and my rebellion. I secured a full scholarship to an Ivy League school, which my parents treated less like a triumph and more like a sensible financial decision. I studied computer science and disappeared into the brutal, exhilarating world of tech startups. While Chloe was flitting between majors and posting glamorous photos from spring break, I was surviving on coffee and sheer will, working 80-hour weeks, sleeping under my desk on a beanbag chair, and considering ramen noodles a hot meal. But it paid off. By the time I was 28, the scrappy company I'd helped build from a garage was acquired by a tech giant in a deal that made headlines. I walked away with a net worth that felt like a number from a different reality. My success arrived with a cruel sense of irony. Just as my financial world was exploding with possibilities, my parents' world was imploding. Their small retail business, a boutique that had been their pride and joy for 2 decades, was failing. A perfect storm of poor management, a refusal to adapt to online retail, and a brutal economic downturn had left them on the verge of bankruptcy. They didn't tell me, of course. My father's pride was a fortress. I found out on a Tuesday night when my mother called me, her voice a choked, desperate whisper. "The bank called again, Olivia. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage. They're starting foreclosure proceedings." The sound of her fear was a physical blow. These were the people who had lectured me my whole life about responsibility, and their foundation was crumbling. That night, I made the decision that would define the next 5 years of my life. I scheduled an emergency meeting with my financial advisor, a discreet and brilliant older man named Thomas. I laid out the situation, my voice shaking. "I have to save them," I told him. "But they can absolutely never know the money is coming from me. It would destroy my father." Thomas listened, his expression impassive. "This is a dangerous path, Olivia," he warned. "Financial entanglements with family rarely end well." "I don't care," I insisted. "He's my dad." So Thomas helped me build the Gilded Cage. It was a masterpiece of financial subterfuge. We set up a series of anonymous trusts and shell companies. A few weeks later, a thick, cream-colored envelope arrived at my parents' house. It was from the estate of a distant relative they barely remembered, a fiction we'd crafted out of thin air. The letter established a trust that paid off their business debts and the mortgage, providing a generous monthly stipend on top. An inheritance from a ghost. Then, we created a prestigious alumni foundation at Chloe's university. This foundation awarded her a full-ride scholarship to finish her degree, a scholarship that covered not only tuition but also the rent on a luxury downtown apartment, a new car, and a monthly allowance that was more than most people's salary. A college fund with no strings attached. It worked like a charm. The lines of stress vanished from my parents' faces. Chloe's Instagram feed became a highlight reel of brunches, boutiques, and weekend trips. Their gratitude was immense, directed at lucky stars and benevolent strangers, but never at me. I was their secret savior, the silent ghost in their financial machine. I told myself I was preserving their dignity. I didn't realize I was simply enabling their dysfunction, building a more beautiful prison for all of us. And into this fragile, secret-filled world, I brought Liam, the one person I thought was truly my own, the one person who I believed loved me for me, not for what I could provide. Liam was supposed to be my reward for a life of relentless hard work. He was a successful architect, intelligent, charming, and he looked at me in a way that made me feel truly seen, not as a problem solver or a provider, but as a woman. When he slipped a beautiful diamond ring on my finger, it felt like the final, perfect piece of my carefully constructed life clicking into place. For the first time, I felt like I was going to have it all. The illusion began to crack as we started planning the wedding. Small, strange things started to go wrong, and Chloe was always at the center of them. The initial consultation with our dream florist was mysteriously rescheduled for the following week. The florist said my personal assistant had called to change it. I didn't have a personal assistant. When I asked Chloe, who had offered to help coordinate, she just laughed it off with a wave of her hand. Oh my God, that must have been me. They must have misunderstood. Sorry, Liv. Wedding brain, you know? She said it so brightly, so innocently, that I felt foolish for even questioning it. A week later, I received a frantic call from the venue manager. Our $10,000 deposit, which was a week overdue, had never arrived. I felt my blood run cold. I had personally written the check and given it to Chloe to drop off, since the venue was right around the corner from her ridiculously expensive apartment. I immediately called her. She swore up and down that she had delivered it herself. They must have lost it, Liv. Their office is so disorganized. But a quick check of my online bank records told a different story. The check had been cashed 2 days after I wrote it. The digital image showed Chloe's signature on the back. It had been deposited directly into her account. When I drove to her apartment and confronted her with the printout from my bank, she crumpled. She burst into spectacular tears, collapsing onto her plush velvet sofa. I'm so sorry, she wailed. My car payment was due and I was short. I was just going to borrow it for a few days and pay them in cash before you noticed. It was just a timing issue, I swear. I looked around her perfect apartment, at the designer shoes kicked off by the door, and the shopping bags from Chanel sitting on her kitchen counter. Instead of seeing the deceit, I chose to see the desperation she was performing. I paid the deposit again, wiring the money directly this time, telling myself she was just hopelessly irresponsible, not malicious. I was an expert at making excuses for her. My parents had trained me well. The real warning, the one that should have shattered everything, came from the one person I never expected, Liam's younger brother, Ethan. He was a good kid, quiet and observant. At our engagement party, he pulled me aside near the bar, his expression deeply uncomfortable. Olivia, he began, shifting his weight from foot to foot and refusing to meet my eyes. Look, I don't want to cause any drama. I really don't. But I've seen Liam and Chloe out together. A few times. Without you. A cold dread washed over me. What do you mean, out together? Like, at a coffee shop across town a few weeks ago. And then last week, I saw his car parked outside her apartment building late at night. I was just driving by, but they looked intense. The way they were talking. It wasn't normal. He finally looked at me, his eyes full of apology. I'm probably wrong. It's probably nothing. but I just think you should be careful." That night, my hands were shaking as I asked Liam about it. His reaction was a masterclass in manipulation. He didn't get angry. He got concerned. "Babe, seriously?" he said, letting out a short, dismissive laugh. He came over and put his hands on my shoulders, his voice softening into a hypnotic, reasonable tone. "She's your sister. She is my future sister-in-law. We're planning a surprise for you for the reception. That's all." Ethan has a big imagination. He tilted my chin up to look at him. "You've been under so much stress with the wedding. You're working too hard. You seem exhausted, and you're getting paranoid." He kissed my forehead. "Don't invent problems where there aren't any, okay? Trust me." And I did. I chose to trust him. I let him convince me that the problem was my stress, my paranoia, my exhaustion, not his behavior. The gaslighting was so brutally effective because it played on my deepest insecurity, that I was the difficult, demanding one, just like my parents always implied. The final, undeniable proof fell into my lap 2 days before the rehearsal dinner. I was at my parents' house, helping my mom clear out some old boxes of seasonal decorations from the attic. Tucked away in a dusty hatbox, beneath a tangle of Christmas lights, was a small, pink diary with a flimsy gold lock. Chloe's. My heart hammered against my ribs. My conscience screamed at me to put it back. But an instinct for self-preservation, long dormant, took over. My hands were already breaking the cheap lock. I flipped through the pages, my eyes scanning for my name, for Liam's name. And then I found it. It wasn't just an entry, it was a chronicle of my destruction. October 12th, Liam told me today he's never met anyone like me. He said Olivia is admirable, but I'm intoxicating. I finally have something that's hers, something she can't buy. November 3rd, he kissed me. In his car, right outside my apartment, after we'd spent hours discussing wedding plans. It was everything I imagined. He says he feels trapped, that the wedding and the merger of families is too big to stop now, but that his heart is with me. December 1st, the plan is set. It's horribly, brilliantly perfect. I'll fake a pregnancy. A little health scare, some dramatic complications. All eyes will be on me, on us. After the wedding, after the honeymoon she pays for, we'll stage a tragic miscarriage. By then, Olivia will be out of the picture. Liam can file for divorce, citing emotional distress. He'll still be part of the family, close to her parents' money. He has no idea where that money really comes from. It's almost too easy. The final entry was from the day before. December 15th, rehearsal dinner tomorrow. Showtime. I've practiced my concerned but brave face in the mirror for an hour. It's very convincing. Liam will play the part of the worried, supportive partner. Mom and Dad will be so distraught, they'll do anything we say. By the end of this weekend, this entire wedding will be mine. I sat there, in the suffocating silence of my parents' dusty attic, the little pink book feeling like a bomb in my hands. The air was thick with the smell of mothballs and betrayal. I finally knew the truth. All of it. If you're still listening, please do me a favor and like this video, and comment with the number 1 below. It lets me know you've given me a like, and it tells me you're here with me on this journey. Your support means the world to me. Just comment the number 1, and let me tell you what happened next. Walking into the oak room that night was the hardest thing I've ever done. Every smiling face, every warm congratulation felt like a shard of glass against my skin. Armed with the horrifying truth from Chloe's diary, the entire scene played out before me like a surreal, slow-motion tragedy. But this time, I wasn't the victim. I was the director, waiting for the final act. I watched Chloe, the star of our little show. She kept a hand resting protectively on her flat stomach, her eyes darting around the room to make sure everyone was noticing her delicate condition. I watched Liam, my handsome, treacherous fiancé, place a concerned hand on the small of her back, whispering in her ear. I watched my parents fuss over her, bringing her water, fluffing the cushion behind her back. It was all a perfectly choreographed performance, and I felt a strange, chilling sense of calm wash over me. The grief and rage had burned away, leaving behind something cold, hard, and clear. A block of ice in my chest where my heart used to be. I knew exactly what I had to do. When my father stood to give his toast and Chloe cut him off with her perfectly timed gasp, I didn't feel shock. I felt a grim sense of validation. Showtime. I let the scene play out, just as she'd written. I watched the murmurs of concern ripple through our friends and family. I watched my mother rush to Chloe's side. And I watched as she walked over to me, her face a mask of false sympathy, and delivered her poison-laced whisper, "Let Chloe and Liam have the wedding." I let her words hang in the air for a moment longer, savoring the stunned silence from the few guests who had overheard. Then, I stood up. I picked up my own champagne flute, the crystal cool and solid against my skin. 40 pairs of eyes turned to me, expecting tears, expecting me to run from the room. They were about to be disappointed. "Thank you, Mom," I said, my voice ringing out, clear and steady, cutting through the tense atmosphere. "Thank you for that incredibly practical suggestion. And thank you, Chloe, for your deep concern about stealing my spotlight. It's a valid worry." A confused frown flickered across Chloe's face. Liam, standing beside me, shifted uncomfortably. His hand was still on my arm, and I had the sudden urge to burn it off. "You see," I continued, taking a small, deliberate sip of champagne. "I happen to know a little bit about your complications. In fact, I know everything about them. I know, for instance, that you've been practicing your concerned but brave face in the mirror for the past week." The blood drained from Chloe's face. She looked like she'd been slapped. My mother's eyes widened in alarm. "Olivia, this is neither the time nor the place," she started, her voice sharp. "Oh, I disagree," I said, my voice hardening. I turned my full attention to my sister. "I think this is the perfect time and the perfect place. You wrote about it, Chloe. In your little pink diary. Page 47, I believe. The one with the cheap gold lock you keep in the attic. You detailed your entire, brilliant plan to fake a pregnancy, stage a tragic miscarriage after the honeymoon, and completely demolish my life. You went through my private things?" Chloe shrieked, her mask of delicate victimhood shattering into 1,000 pieces of pure fury. "You are a psycho." Some of the guests gasped. Others just stared, transfixed by the unfolding drama. "Yes, Chloe, I am," I said without an ounce of shame. "And I'm so glad I did. Because it's also where I read all about your sordid little affair with my fiancé." A collective intake of breath swept through the room. I turned to Liam, who was now staring at me, his face ashen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. "She wrote about your first kiss, Liam. In your car, right outside her apartment. She said you felt trapped with me, but that your heart was with her. Is that right, Liam? Is your heart with her right now?" He was speechless, a deer in the headlights of his own deceit. "This is outrageous," my father boomed, his face turning a blotchy red. He was on his feet now, pointing a trembling finger at me. "Olivia, you are embarrassing this family. Whatever petty sibling rivalry this is, you need to stop it right now." "Embarrassing the family?" I let out a short, bitter laugh that held no humor. "Dad, you have no idea what embarrassment is. But you are about to. You think this is about sibling rivalry? No. This is about a lifetime of lies. And tonight, every single one of them comes out into the light." It was the moment. The final checkmate. I reached into my purse and pulled out the thick, leather-bound folder my lawyer had helped me prepare. I walked to the head of the table and placed it firmly down in front of my father. It landed with a heavy, satisfying thud that echoed in the dead silence. "You're right, Mom. We should be practical," I said, my voice dropping, becoming dangerously quiet. "So let's talk about practicalities. Let's talk about the family finances. You're worried about your inheritance, Dad? Let's talk about the real source of this family's money." I opened the folder, revealing the top document. 5 years ago, this family was facing bankruptcy. The business was gone, the house was in foreclosure. Then, miraculously, a trust from a distant relative's estate saved you from ruin. Do you know who that distant, wealthy relative was? I paused, letting my eyes sweep over their confused, horrified faces. It was me. I pulled out the first document, a bank statement showing a 7-figure transfer from my corporate sale into the trust's holding account. The tech company I built, the one you always called my little computer hobby, was acquired. And I used that money, my money, to save you. I pulled out another document. Chloe, your prestigious scholarship? The one that paid for your luxury apartment, your BMW, your endless shopping sprees? That was me. I am the anonymous donor. I am your entire college fund. My voice grew stronger, each word a hammer blow, dismantling their world brick by brick. The business stabilization grant that saved the last of your assets, Dad? My money. The 7 times I've had to pay off Chloe's maxed-out credit cards in the last 3 years? Me. The down payment on your new SUV, Mom, the one you said was an unexpected insurance windfall? Me. I have been funding this entire family's fraudulent life for 5 solid years. I've already spoken to my lawyer. The trust that owns this house? It's managed by a shell company that I am the sole director of. The generous salary I paid myself for years, the one I used to fund all of this, was earned through my own blood, sweat, and tears. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. The faces of my family were a gallery of ruin. Shock. Disbelief. And finally, the dawning, sickening realization that their entire world was a lie, and I held all the strings. So you see, I said, closing the folder with a sharp snap. I straightened my shoulders and looked at each of them one last time. You didn't just betray your daughter and your sister. You betrayed your sole benefactor. I picked up my purse. And I was leaving. I walked out of that restaurant and I didn't look back. I didn't run. I walked with a deliberate, steady pace, my head held high. The sounds of chaos erupted behind me. I could hear Chloe finally letting out a genuine, ugly sob, my mother yelling my name in a tone that was half rage and half panic, my father's stunned, sputtering silence, but I just kept walking. I reached the cool night air and it felt like the first clean breath I had taken in 5 years. I got into my car and drove. I had no destination. The glittering city lights blurred into long, abstract streaks of color through my tear-filled eyes. I felt nothing and everything all at once. The righteous anger that had carried me through the confrontation was a wildfire in my veins, but underneath it was a grief so profound, so vast, it felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest, threatening to crush me. I was completely and utterly numb. I drove for hours, up the coast and back, the rhythm of the road a hypnotic, empty comfort. The anger slowly burned itself out, leaving behind only the hollow, aching emptiness. I finally went back to the house I was supposed to share with Liam. Our house. It was dark and silent. His charcoal gray coat was thrown over a chair, his leather shoes were by the door. Signs of a life that was now a lie. I walked through the rooms we had decorated together, my hand tracing the back of the sofa we had chosen, my eyes falling on the photos of us smiling on the mantelpiece. I felt like a ghost in my own life, haunting the ruins of a future that would never happen. It was there, in the suffocating silence of our perfect, fraudulent home, that I finally broke. I slid down the wall, collapsed onto the cold hardwood floor, and wept. It wasn't a pretty cry. It was a raw, guttural sob for the family I thought I had, for the love I thought was real, for the woman I used to be. The next day, the phone calls started. They were a relentless assault. It began with my mother. Her voice was a syrupy, cloying mix of fake concern and rising panic. "Olivia, honey, we need to talk. I know you were emotional last night. You weren't thinking clearly. We're your family. We can fix this." "There is nothing to fix, Mom," I said, my voice flat and dead. "Don't be ridiculous," she snapped, her tone shifting instantly from sweet to sharp. "You can't just cut us off. That's not how family works. What about the mortgage? Chloe's tuition is due next month." "That sounds like a problem for you to solve," I said, and hung up the phone. An hour later, my father called. He didn't plead. He demanded. "You will come back to this house and you will apologize to your sister and to Liam. You have created an absolute, humiliating mess, Olivia. I don't know what kind of sick, twisted game you're playing, but it ends now. You will reinstate the funds." "You're right, Dad," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "It does end now." I hung up on him, too. Chloe sent a barrage of hysterical texts, each one more venomous than the last. They were filled with curses and accusations, calling me a monster, a freak, a jealous hag for airing our private business. There was not a single word of apology. Not a hint of remorse. They insisted on one final meeting at their house, the house that I owned. I agreed. I needed to see their faces one last time. I needed this to be final. I walked into the living room, and the three of them were sitting there like a tribunal, a united front of delusion. Liam was beside Chloe on the sofa, his hand resting possessively on her knee. They looked like the wronged party. "Olivia," my father began, taking on the tone of a disappointed CEO addressing a rogue employee. "We are willing to overlook your theatrical outburst. We understand you were hurt. If you agree to continue the financial arrangements as they were, and offer a sincere, public apology to Chloe and Liam, we can all put this unfortunate incident behind us." I just stared at them. I felt a strange, clinical detachment, like a scientist observing a particularly fascinating species of parasite. They weren't sorry. They weren't ashamed. They were simply afraid of losing their host. They hadn't just betrayed me, they were now trying to negotiate the terms of my continued enslavement. It was the final, brutal confirmation I needed. This wasn't a family I could fix. It was a sickness I had to amputate from my life. It felt like a divorce from my entire history. "There will be no arrangements," I said, my voice as cold and clear as ice. "I've already spoken to my lawyer." The color drained from my father's face. My mother's hand flew to her throat. "The holding company that owns this property will be serving you an official eviction notice tomorrow morning. Per the terms of the trust, you have 30 days to vacate the premises. All trust accounts, stipends, and credit lines have been frozen, effective immediately." I looked directly at Chloe, whose jaw was hanging open. "Your apartment lease is paid through the end of the month. After that, you're on your own. I hope your retail salary is enough to cover it." My mother gasped, a strangled, desperate sound. "You wouldn't dare. We're your parents." "I already have," I said. I stood up and walked towards the door, not looking back. Her pleading voice, now stripped of all its pretense, followed me. "Olivia, please. You're our daughter. You can't do this." I paused at the door, my hand on the cool metal of the knob. I turned around slowly, my gaze sweeping over their horrified faces. "A daughter is someone you love and protect," I said softly, the words sharp as razors. "Not someone you use as a walking, talking bank account and then try to discard like yesterday's trash. I don't know what I am to you, but it's not that." I walked out the door and didn't stop until I was in my car. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking with a strange mixture of grief and adrenaline. I found my mother's contact. Block. My father. Block. Chloe. Block. Liam. Block. The silence in the car was absolute. It was the sound of my old life ending. It was the sound of freedom. And it was the loneliest, most terrifying sound I had ever heard. The first few weeks after cutting them off were a blur of legal necessities and profound, echoing silence. My lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Susan, handled the official proceedings. There were documents to sign, accounts to formally close, and legal notices to be served. Every signature on those papers felt like a deliberate, painful step away from the person I used to be. The Olivia who fixed everything, who paid for everything, who carried the weight of everyone's happiness on her shoulders, was being legally dismantled. I started seeing a therapist, a kind but incisively firm woman named Dr. Anya. Her office was a quiet sanctuary, the only place I didn't have to pretend to be strong. I sat on her comfortable couch and unpacked 25 years of carefully suppressed resentment and misguided duty. You weren't just giving them money, Olivia, she told me during one particularly difficult session, after I'd confessed to a sharp pang of guilt. You were giving them a shield. A shield from reality, from consequences, from the need to grow. You became the enabler-in-chief. Your secret generosity, which you rationalized as an act of love, was also an act of control. It kept them dependent on you, and it kept you locked in the role of the responsible one. A role you've been playing since you were a child. Her words were a gut punch, but they were true. I had been so laser-focused on their betrayal that I hadn't examined my own part in creating the toxic dynamic that made it possible. I had bought their affection, and I was shocked when they tried to sell it to the highest bidder. My financial support wasn't a gift, it was a transaction, and the price was my own authenticity. News of their downfall trickled in, mostly from Ethan, Liam's brother. He felt a profound sense of shame over his brother's actions and seemed to believe that keeping me informed was a small form of penance. He called once a week, his voice always hesitant. Liam was fired, he told me about a month after the dinner. Actually, he was given the option to resign or be fired. The firm is all about its image. A scandal involving a senior architect cheating on his wealthy fiancé with her sister, it's not a good look. They rescinded his promotion offer, and he's out. He told me he's having trouble getting calls back from other firms. There was no triumph in his voice, only a deep sadness. I felt a strange emptiness. His ruin didn't bring me joy, just a grim confirmation of cause and effect. A few weeks later, Ethan called again, his voice even quieter. I was driving through your old neighborhood, he said. I saw a sign in front of your parents' house. A foreclosure sign. I pictured the home I grew up in, the manicured lawn my dad used to obsess over every Saturday, the porch swing where my mom used to read on summer evenings. For a fleeting moment, I felt that old, familiar urge, the pull to fix it, to make it better. I mentioned it to Dr. Anya. What would fixing it accomplish, Olivia? She asked gently, her eyes knowing. Would it earn you the love and respect you always wanted? Or would it just reset the game, putting you right back in the role you just fought so hard to escape? She was right. I did nothing. The silence on my end was the loudest statement I could make. The last update was about Chloe. Ethan had run into her at a greasy spoon diner downtown, the kind of place she used to mock. She's a waitress there, he said, a note of disbelief in his voice. She was working a double shift, she said. She looked worn out. Really worn out. I conjured the image in my mind, my sister, who had always looked like she'd just stepped out of a magazine, her nails perfectly manicured, her hair professionally blown out. Now, I pictured her in a stained apron, her hair tied back in a net, carrying heavy plates of fries and burgers. The princess was finally learning what it was like to work for a living, to earn a real salary. The thought didn't make me happy, but it felt just. I spent my days processing it all. Grieving the family I thought I had, the love I thought was real. Grieving the man I thought I was going to marry. The white-hot anger slowly cooled, replaced by a deep, weary sadness. Dr. Anya helped me see the generational patterns, the way my parents had replicated their own childhood dynamics, putting Chloe on a pedestal just as my father's younger brother had been. It didn't excuse their actions, but it provided a context that moved them from simple villains to flawed, tragic figures. One rainy afternoon, as I was describing the constant, suffocating pressure I'd felt my whole life to be perfect, to be the successful one, to be the one who held everything together so everyone else could be happy, Dr. Anya stopped me. She looked at me over the top of her glasses, her gaze steady and piercing. "For 25 years, she said, her voice soft but powerful, you've been the responsible one. You've been the daughter, the sister, the fixer, the benefactor." She leaned forward slightly. "Who would you be if you were just Olivia?" The question hung in the air between us, simple and yet impossibly complex. It was the most terrifying question I had ever been asked. And for the first time in my entire, overachieving life, I had absolutely no idea what the answer was. Nearly a year passed in that quiet, uncertain space. A year of therapy, of long walks with no destination, of rediscovering the simple contours of a life that wasn't defined by anyone else's needs or crises. It was the hardest and most peaceful year of my life. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, a single, plain white envelope arrived in my mailbox. The address was written in my father's familiar, slightly shaky handwriting. My first instinct, a jolt of pure adrenaline, was to rip it in half and throw it in the trash. But a deeper, calmer curiosity won. I opened it. The letter inside was written on a single sheet of cheap notebook paper. It was short. "Olivia, I don't expect you to ever forgive us. I know the damage is too deep for that. I am writing to you today not to ask for anything, but to say that I am sorry. We failed you as parents. We were weak and we were blind. We let our pride and our foolish favoritism for Chloe destroy the best thing we ever had. I see that now. It is a terrible thing to see the truth so late. I hope one day you can find the happiness you have always deserved." That was it. There was no request for money. No justification. No subtle blame shifting. It was the first truly honest thing he had said to me in years. After a week of deliberation and a long session with Dr. Anya, I sent him a brief, formal email. I agreed to meet him and my mother for coffee. We met at a sterile, neutral coffee shop in a part of town none of us frequented. They were already there when I arrived, sitting at a small table in the corner. They looked diminished. The weight of the last year had settled on them, aging them beyond their years. My father's hair was thinner and almost completely white. My mother, who had always been so meticulous about her appearance, wore no makeup and her clothes were from a department store, not the designer brands I had once funded. "Thank you for coming, Olivia," my father said, his voice quiet and raspy. He couldn't meet my eyes. "We just wanted to apologize," my mother added, her own eyes immediately welling up. "In person. We were so wrong. So terribly wrong. We took you for granted, your strength, your generosity, and we let our pride and our favoritism for Chloe destroy everything." I listened. I didn't interrupt. When they were finished, the silence stretched between us. I didn't offer the easy comfort of forgiveness. It wasn't mine to give yet, and I wasn't sure they had earned it. But I did offer them a path forward. "We can have a civil relationship," I said, my voice calm and firm, the voice of a CEO laying out new terms. "We can talk on holidays, exchange birthday cards. But the roles we used to play are over. I am not your safety net. I am not your fixer. I am not your bank. I am just your daughter. That is all I can be from now on." They both nodded, their eyes downcast, accepting my terms. It wasn't a happy reunion. There were no hugs. It was a formal negotiation, a painful resetting of the rules for a fractured family. But for the first time, it felt real. My encounter with Chloe was less planned. I was in a large grocery store a month later, in the produce aisle, when I heard a voice call my name. I turned and saw her. She was wearing the drab, gray uniform of a local office supply store. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, dark roots showing. She was thinner, and the sparkle that had always defined her was gone, replaced by a deep, settled exhaustion. We stared at each other for a long, awkward moment amid the bright lights and cheerful music of the store. "Hi," she finally said. "Hi, Chloe." She clutched her plastic shopping basket to her chest like a shield. "I heard you saw Mom and Dad." "I did." She let out a short, humorless, bitter laugh. "I guess they told you, then." "Liam left me. About 4 months ago. He said he couldn't handle being with someone who had no ambition." "Can you believe that?" "Turns out, my ambition was just to be with him." Her voice cracked. "He's already engaged to some rich divorcee from the West Side. I guess he finally found the inheritance he was looking for." She looked down at her own worn-out sneakers. "I ruined my life for nothing," she said, her voice flat. It wasn't an apology. It was an epitaph for her old life, a stark admission of fact. The custody of her future was now solely in her own hands, and she clearly had no idea what to do with it. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, for the first time without the blinding filters of jealousy or resentment. I just saw a sad, broken woman who had burned down her own life in a desperate attempt to steal the warmth from mine. "I'm going back to school," she mumbled, as if to herself. "A community college. Trying to get a certificate in bookkeeping." I nodded slowly. I reached into my purse, but I didn't pull out my wallet. I pulled out a pen and a slip of paper from my notebook. I wrote down the name of a respected professional certification program, a good one that would actually lead to a decent job. "If you finish your community college course with at least a B average, and you provide me the transcript," I said, handing her the paper, "I will pay the tuition for this program. It will be paid directly to the school. Upon your successful completion." She stared at the paper, then at me, her eyes filled with a raw confusion I had never seen before. "That's the only deal on the table, Chloe," I said, my voice even and calm. "Take it or leave it." It wasn't an act of forgiveness. It was an act of finality. An investment not in her, but in my own hard-won peace of mind. It was the last debt I would ever pay on her behalf. It's been 2 years since that night at the rehearsal dinner. My life today looks nothing like the one I had so meticulously planned, and I am so profoundly, deeply grateful for that fact. I sold the big, empty house that Liam and I were supposed to fill with children and a life of perfect illusions. It felt like selling a ghost. I took a portion of the money and I finally did something just for me. I traveled. I didn't just go on a vacation, I went on a pilgrimage to find myself. I stood in awe before the pyramids in Egypt, feeling small and insignificant in the best possible way. I walked the ancient, cobblestone streets of Rome, imagining the centuries of lives lived there. I sat on a quiet, pristine beach in Thailand for 2 weeks, doing nothing but reading novels, eating fresh fruit, and watching the sunset paint the sky in colors I never knew existed. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't working toward a promotion, I wasn't trying to hit a quarterly goal, I wasn't fixing a family crisis. I was just living. Breathing. Being. When I came back, I bought a small, sunny condo in a different part of the city, a neighborhood with trees and coffee shops and a sense of community. It's filled with art I've collected from my travels, shelves overflowing with books, and a comfortable armchair that is my favorite place in the world. It's a space that reflects me, not a version of me I thought someone else wanted. I'm dating someone new, a kind, funny history professor named David who loves to cook and has an easy, genuine laugh. He knows my story. All of it. I told him everything one evening, and he just listened, and when I was done, he just took my hand and said, "I'm so sorry you went through that. But I'm damn glad you did, because it led you here." It's a quiet, easy love, built on the solid foundation of honesty, not on shifting secrets. My relationship with my parents remains a work in progress. It's civil. We talk on birthdays and holidays, as I said we would. The conversations are often stilted, filled with the ghosts of things left unsaid, but they are honest. They are living within their means in their small condo. My father has taken a part-time job at a local hardware store, and my mother sells some of her crafts on Etsy. There is a newfound, albeit weary, dignity in their self-sufficiency. They are slowly, painstakingly, learning to be adults in their late 60s. Chloe finished her community college course with a B+ average. She sent me the transcript, as we agreed. True to my word, I paid the tuition for her bookkeeping certification. She works an entry-level job at a small accounting firm now. It's not glamorous, but it's a start. We don't talk often. Maybe a brief, awkward text every few months. The deep, jagged wound between us will probably never fully heal into a seamless bond. The trust is gone forever. But the all-consuming anger is gone. In its place is just a quiet, lingering sadness for the sisterhood we never had and now never will. Sometimes I think about that night, that single moment when my entire world detonated. The betrayal was the most brutally painful experience of my life. It was a raging fire that burned my entire world to the ground, leaving nothing but ash. But now, from this vantage point, I can see what I couldn't see then. Sometimes, a wildfire is the only thing that can clear the dead undergrowth and allow for new things to grow. I was trapped. I was trapped in the role of the responsible one, the fixer, the daughter who had to endlessly achieve just to feel worthy of a place in her own family. I never would have left on my own. I needed that cannonball to crash through the walls of the prison I had helped build for myself. They thought that by taking my fiancé and my wedding, they were taking everything from me. They thought they were staging a coup. But what they really did was stage a liberation. They freed me from the crushing, lifelong weight of their expectations and my own desperate, childish need for their approval. They took what they thought was valuable, and in doing so, they gave me the only thing that truly was, myself. For 30 years, I was a daughter and a sister. I was a provider and a fixer. Now, finally, I am just Olivia. And that is more than enough. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to tell, but sharing it feels like the final step in my healing. I have a question for you. Has a painful truth ever ended up setting you free? Let me know your story in the comments below. I'd love to read them. And if my journey resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more stories. Thank you again for being here with me.